This is a video review of the Canon 60D digital camera. Launched in June 2010, it's currently the latest addition to Canon's line of XXD prosumer level cameras. With this camera here, I've attached a Canon 28-105mm lens on the front. The camera weighs 755 grams, if you ignore the weight of the lens as well. It's an 18 megapixel camera. Its predecessor, the Canon 50D, was 15 megapixels, so there's a 3 megapixel improvement. The actual body construction of the 60D, the body's made out of something called polycarbonate resin on an aluminium chassis. Now its predecessors, they had a magnesium alloy body construction, and this one does feel slightly more plasticky compared to those. The 60D has 9 focusing points, so that's the same as its predecessors. The ISO range as well is from 100 all the way up to 6400, but there is a special option to increase that again to 12800. ISO, for example, is accessed by pressing this button at the top here, and then you would use the slider wheel at the front to change between the settings, and you can actually see the various ISO levels directly through the viewfinder at the top. With the shooting mode wheel here, you've also got a lock button, so you can't actually change the shooting modes unless you depress the lock button at the top. Gone is the white balance button, which you might have seen on older versions of this camera, and you access the white balance by pressing one of the buttons on the back of the camera. Now, all the previous XXD cameras took compact flash, but the 60D has changed that, and it takes SD cards instead. One of the latest features with the 60D is the video recording mode. So if you just switch it all the way to the end, that turns it into video recording mode, and it will shoot in high-def 1080p video. Looking at the back of the camera, you can see this is quite a lot different from the layout of the 50D. The on-off switch is now moved beneath the shooting mode wheel at the top here, and the big change is obviously the flip-out LCD screen. This is great. It provides you with greater versatility in how you take your photographs. In terms of the various buttons, you have an info button here. This takes you into 3 different pages to give you immediate information about the picture you're going to take. You've also got an alignment little gizmo here, which basically allows you to see that you're actually taking a picture and it's properly aligned to the horizontal. You've got also, if I just close that down, you've also got quick control mode by pressing the Q button, and this gives you immediate access to change the various settings of the picture before you take it. Now if you press the set button here, this gives you immediate access to the various white balance settings. Now if you used to have a 50D, for example, there was a little joystick for navigating around the various images. This has been replaced by the cursor system here, which is nestled inside the actual navigation wheel at the bottom. Personally, I preferred having the joystick at the top here and using both the navigation wheel and the joystick like that, but that's a subjective thing really. The only other button worth mentioning here is the auto live view mode. There's 2 functions for this button. Firstly, if you're shooting video, you use this button to start and stop recording. And secondly, if I take the lens cap off and I press this button, it immediately changes to having the viewfinder coming through the LCD screen instead. Again, that's quite a useful tool. To show you some example photos taken with the 60D, this shot here was taken with a Canon 15mm fisheye lens. This is a macro shot taken with a Sigma 70-300mm macro lens. Now this shot here was set at ISO level 100, and then on the next picture the ISO level has been up to 6400, so you can just see a slight increase in grain by using a higher ISO level here. The remaining shots were taken with a Canon 18-55mm lens. And you can see full res versions of all these photographs if you go to my website. As I mentioned earlier, the 60D is the latest in Canon's prosumer line of cameras, but there have been 5 previous versions. This one here is the Canon 40D. It's been around about 4 years now, but it's typically, I mean, you can't buy a new 40D anymore, but you can pick up a good conditioned used Canon 40D for half the price, or even less than half the price of a 60D. So the question is it worth paying the extra money and getting the latest camera? Well, there are a couple of plus and minus points when you compare these two cameras together, and I'll briefly go over those. So firstly, the 60D has the advantage of being able to shoot in high definition video. You can't shoot high def video in any of the previous XXD cameras, so that's something reserved solely for the 60D. It's got the flip out screen on the back, you know, which is great. I find that very useful, very versatile. It's also got live view mode, which means you can see through the LCD screen rather than the viewfinder. You get live view mode on the 50D, but you don't get the ability to shoot video with it. Other advantages is the 60D has got high ISO range. It will shoot up to 12,800, whereas the 40D here only shoots at a maximum ISO level of 3,200. The 60D takes SD cards as memory, whereas the 40D only takes compact flash. Now, I've read somewhere that compact flash is actually faster to read and write data to than SD cards, so that might be worth something to look into. So on the downside, the 60D is twice as expensive. Even though the 60D has got a higher megapixel value, in terms of image quality they're going to be the same because they both cameras have the same processor chips inside them. In terms of the body construction, I prefer the 40D's body because it's made out of magnesium alloy. It just feels sturdier than the 60D. The 60D does feel, in my opinion, just slightly more plasticky. When shooting in continuous mode, the 40D can shoot at 6.3 times a second, pretty fast, whereas the 60D will only shoot at 5.3 times a second. Just slightly slower, but it means you're going to get an extra shot per second when you're using the 40D. Now, in terms of the menu button layout on the back, personally I prefer the 40D's menu system. I prefer the use of the navigation wheel and the joystick here and the layout of the buttons at the bottom when I compare it to the 60D. That's because I just get a bit confused with the cursor system and the navigation wheel on the outside. It just feels a bit too bunched up in my opinion. So that's my overview of the Canon 60D. In conclusion, it's a very, very good camera. I would be very happy having this one, and you take good quality pictures with it, and it is relatively easy to use. Now, would I buy this camera as opposed to, say, a 40D? If I was going to shoot lots of video, or if I was doing lots of macro photography, then I probably would consider getting the 60D because the flip out LCD screen at the back I think is going to make it easier to do macro photography. If on the other hand that's not the case and I want a camera just for lots of different purposes but no one specific use, then I'd probably prefer to save my money and buy the 40D instead, because at the end of the day it's half the price and it takes good quality pictures, and I think it's slightly better body construction, and I personally prefer the layout of the buttons at the back. But saying that though, the 60D is still a really good camera, and it's great for some specific purposes. There we are. I hope you've enjoyed this overview, and if you'd like to check out some more reviews you could go to my YouTube channel, which is SLR Lens. Thanks.